everyone, Josh here, and this is me doing my review of Dante's Inferno, an animated epic, which, if you have not watched my game review, which I'll link to right here, is the animated companion piece to the EA video game of the same name. And while it doesn't quite follow the exact same story, it hits most of the same notes. And I wanted to address this right off the bat, actually, because it's really confusing me now. The story veers off in a few different directions, and I just don't understand what they are doing at this point. They include more things from the poem at times, but then just random shit happens throughout portions of this movie. I'm not really going to spoil anything, because I was going to use one or two examples that happened near the beginning. At the very beginning, in the first part of the movie, Dante is running around the forest, and he sees kind of a soldier cloaked in shadows and behind him, and there's like these panthers that jump out at him. And then you think to yourself, oh, how is he going to get out of this? And then his horse does a backflip off a rock. And you're thinking to yourself, what the fuck just happened? And this kind of thing happens all the time, where it seems silly to say that it shattered my sense of disbelief, but that's frankly what it did. I mean, even though I'm watching about something that's a portrayal of hell, which, being an atheist, I don't think exists, and it is a fantasy world, regardless of that, it just seems completely out of place. I mean, I don't understand why these things happen sometimes, particularly the entrance to hell and limbo. No, not less limbo, but the entrance to hell is just completely bombastic and random, and death is not even in this one. And I gotta say, this movie almost cheapens the game's plot, which I didn't think was that strong as it was, in that though you get a lot more of Beatrice's side, which I didn't necessarily mind. In particular, this movie actually has a tendency to be really gruesome. Not just in violence, but where Satan shows Beatrice at one point, hey, this is how much I can torture you, and burns all her skin off while she's still alive, and obviously it comes back because she can't die, she's already dead. And that's really freaking evil. And I liked inclusions like that, but at the same time they changed the plot so that Satan now wants to marry Beatrice, which he may have in the game, but it was never implied. I never got that, and I never got anything of the sort. And it just seemed really silly. And like I mentioned in the game review, it really seems to harken back a lot more to those old school video games where a bad guy took your girl plot lines, and I thought it cheapened the material. It seemed out of place, and especially considering the weighty themes that this kind of work does tackle, even in a sensationalist viewpoint, really felt odd. Anyway, I'm not going to really talk too much more about the story because, well, frankly, it's really not that complicated. You can look it up on your own and go for my game review for a lot of story talk. I really kind of exposited quite a bit too much on that there, so I'll leave you to click that at your own leisure. Anyway, animation-wise, which is what really you should be watching this for because the story is not that good, it's basically just 6 different studios doing the layers of hell, and I realize what you're thinking, maybe at least what I was thinking before I bought this. Wait a second, 6 animation studios and 9 circles. Yeah, them transition over circles. So I think the second animation style goes from lust to maybe the end of gluttony. Anyway, I can't really remember, honestly. Most of this stuff really blended together. Not animation-wise, but story-wise. Animation-wise, I was impressed, but somewhat disappointed at the same time. For one, the opening animation was really bad. I realized, I think this was done by American Studio, but it really looked like an American Studio. It looked like a gory Saturday morning cartoon, and just didn't fit the mood whatsoever. I don't even know what to say, frankly. A lot of this looked nice at times, but still kind of low budget. And I can understand that, considering there probably wasn't a Pixar-level budget on this, don't get me wrong. I didn't necessarily mind that, but it really hindered styles like the first one, and just gave it a cheap look. Particularly the second last one, where is most noted, I think it's only in Fraud. Very, very interesting, but very scattershot, I gotta say, that quality-wise, but in fascinating style in and of itself, though. It's very interesting to look at. And I have to say my favorite was probably the second one, which encompasses lust, gluttony, and maybe the beginning of the latter one, like I said. And it's particularly because there was one flashback sequence in this where Satan shows Beatrice all the sins of man, and it's in this very kind of deep-lined charcoal painting style, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a nice burst of talent. And even though I don't like long-haired Dante, that segment did provide a lot of information, story-wise, and I think that overall, it was probably the most fluid and enjoyable. Although the last one, that was just for treachery in the final boss fight, quote unquote, with Satan, was different, but I actually liked it. The only one I was disappointed, admittedly, I can't remember what circle it was for. You could tell this movie was really memorable. It was done by looked like a Ninja Scroll, basically. Very thick lines, very big muscled men, and it was okay. I thought that Dante looked really too wide-eyed, very much anime style that just didn't quite work here. Overall, though, the animation was certainly interesting enough to carry me through the movie, even when the story just went freaking insane and didn't make a whole lot of sense. There's some CG inserts, most of them fit. At the very end, though, there's one really embarrassing one. But for the most part, the animation is definitely interesting enough to keep you through this feature, even when, like I said, when the plot falters. One thing I did enjoy about this animated movie was that it did give you more background info that I think the game could have used at times, frankly. There was a little more of a setup, and there was more information of characters before you met them, which is a big problem with the game. And while I do think that, like I said, this movie does cheapen the plot with the inclusion of the Satan wants to make Beatrice his bride subplot, without that, I think some of these inclusions could have been added in, particularly more info about Dante as a crusader and with Francesco, and more about his childhood and his father and mother. Those are really great bits. I enjoyed those a lot story-wise. Overall, though, it was one. Oh, God, yeah, I want to mention there was one really odd point when they completely repeated an entire scene, and it was only about 5 minutes after the prior one. I don't know if the teams had any connection to each other, or if this was supposed to be just a flashback that was just really poorly extended, but it was really bizarre. I mean, especially in two different animation styles, you're like, what? I mean, didn't I just see this? The only thing I have a real problem with is, okay, I think it's the second animation style, Virgil's hair. What the fuck happened to it? He is wearing hair that characters from Dragon Ball Z would be envious of. It is sticking straight up. He's got elf ears, the blue kind of goatee, Egyptian beard. He looks insane. And like I said, it's not that I hated it. It just looked really freaking odd, and I really needed to note that. Overall, I don't have too much to complain about for the animated movie. Well, actually, I do. What am I talking about? I'm complaining about it a lot already. Overall, yeah, I guess I gotta say this is maybe a rental. I bought it at Walmart because it was a cheaper price. I didn't want to spend that much money on it. I'm glad I didn't after this, but overall, it's probably a rental. There's no extra features on this outside of a trailer for the game and a couple of animatics, which is basically just storyboard versions and concept art. Nothing to draw you to the DVD. One thing I will note though is that if you're going to rent it, try and find it on Blu-ray because of the somewhat low-budget nature of the animation, it can look really cheap at times, and there's quite a bit of blurriness going on, a little bit of artificing. Check out the Blu-ray if you're going to. Otherwise, you're probably just fine watching this online. There's really not a whole lot here to love, but if you like the game, it's worth checking out. It's less than an hour and a half long, so you're not really wasting a whole lot of time. That's all I say, I guess.